This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream. Get access to my streaming video service Nebula when you sign up for CuriosityStream using the link in the description. The Turkish Grand Prix was a very strange one indeed, and one of the strategic talking points was Hamilton trying to hang on to his original set of intermediate tyres to maintain a podium position, versus the team wanting to pit him for fresh ones to give him better performance. Ultimately, he somewhat reluctantly pitted with 8 laps to go, immediately losing 2 positions and then struggling to get any meaningful speed out of his new tyres. So was it foolish to pit when he did? Did Merck get it wrong? Would the rubber have lasted? After all, Ocon made it through the whole race on a single set of tyres. Sort of. And it was particularly interesting watching the reaction in real time. While Hamilton was openly frustrated, people on the old Twitters lambasted the decision by Mercedes as staying out was obviously the better call. Why are these boffins listening to the cold, disconnected ones and zeros of their computers when they could see reality in front of their faces, and a 7 times world champion was telling them directly it was best to stay out? It was common sense. It was obvious. Merck needed to look up from their laptop screens and see what was really happening. But it's not that simple. It's easy to distrust data analysis and algorithms as they seem so disconnected and intangible. They don't always give you the obvious through line to their outputs. Common sense seems so much more in line with the real world because it's very much about seeing A and reasoning B. A to B logic. You get it, you can follow it. Hardcore data analysis is often looking at A, B, C, D, and E and shoving them in a mystery box and punching out K? Well, where did K come from? You need to pull the mystery box apart and look inside, and also have a degree in mystery boxes from Mystery Box University. And who has that? I mean, look, I have already made a video on why a lot of the AWS-sponsored data graphics on the TV don't really work, because they aren't immediately clear to the viewer what they are. They are opaque and intangible, just numbers from somewhere. It's not immediately understandable. There's no fluidity between the information and the viewer. But that doesn't mean it's wrong or without meaning to someone. And if you're a data analyst, that kind of data output from number crunching can be incredibly meaningful and the kind of thing you make for yourself all weekend long. It can help you make crucial decisions based on probabilities chewed out from actual information. In fact, data analysis in F1 is so powerful that I've previously argued it to be detrimental to the sport itself. F1 teams gather and analyse so much data that I think they know too much about the race before it's even run. They know how each compound of tyre will behave over its life, under different temperatures and fuel loads, how all the parts of their car and their rival's car will evolve over the 60-ish laps. These days they are much less feeling it out between the driver and the engineer in the moment and in debriefs, and a lot more seeing what the computer has to say based on the terabytes of data we've been feeding it. It takes away from some of the spontaneity of racecraft in my opinion, and it's also frustrating for the driver when, from the cockpit everything feels manageable and that a fight can be fought, but a bit of software says, nah mate, you're going to fall flat on your face within 10 minutes. Trust me. It also feels easier to be in the audience, on Twitter or in front of the TV without all of the data making big statements about the right calls on strategy and racecraft. I mean, that is half the fun of watching sports, isn't it? Armchair management. We all do it. Doesn't mean we're right, but it feels good. But a race is a product of a long chain of decisions, and once a decision has been made, you have to follow it through to the next decisions. You can't go back and ponder what if. You can merely speculate after the fact to various degrees of accuracy. So on lap 50, Hamilton pitted for new intermediate tyres, a decision which seemed to do him little favour. But let's go back a little bit. Let's follow the decision chain through to that moment. The Turkish Grand Prix was weird. It was a wet but drying track. Toto Wolff told Sky before the start that the track was absolutely intermediate tyre conditions, but also that he expected the tyres to be torn to shreds within a few laps as a dry line was driven into the tarmac. The intermediates are a very versatile tyre, as they are designed to be. They bridge the gap between a damp track and a wet track, but will still function on a dry line, albeit worse than any slick will, once it gets dry enough. Because the inters have grooves, the tread's footprint exists in blocks, little islands of rubber that meet the tarmac and allow water to channel through the gaps. As such, these blocks of tread flex more than the solid, contiguous tread of a slick tyre, and this stretching of the rubber heats up the tread more readily. Now this is normally fine as the water also helps to cool the rubber, so they're designed to live in this equilibrium of internally heating rubber and cooling wet conditions. But with a sufficiently dry line, the tread can easily overheat, making it fragile and causing the tyres to degrade and, as Toto put it, get torn apart. But as I said, the Turkish Grand Prix was weird. It was a drying track, but it was a drying track for basically the whole race. It stayed in a constant state of in-between, an edging, tantric kind of a race, never fully crossing over to dry, but always promising to, any moment now. So the drivers waited, and they held on to their inters, waiting for the moment to cross the slicks. It would feel foolish to change to new intermediate tyres only for the track to dry out a few minutes later and force an extra stop. Alonso was the first to blink on lap 30. He switched onto new inters rather than faff about any longer, waiting for a dry crossover. His lap times before and after his pit stops were functionally identical, but he became a good point of reference for other strategists. New inters, still working fine. At the same time, Hamilton had closed on Perez, having made his way up to 5th place from his starting spot of 11th with pace that looked, frankly, on something of another level to almost every car around him. Mercedes were easily the best car around this track. At the time Hamilton caught Perez around lap 29:30, Verstappen was 15 seconds up the road, but Hamilton spent a good 5 laps in an unsuccessful battle with Perez, and he fell to about 22 seconds behind Verstappen. This meant Verstappen was able to easily pit on lap 36 and emerge a few seconds ahead of Hamilton, but with lovely fresh rubber. So here we have a first opportunity gone. Had Hamilton been able to pass Perez early on in the battle, he'd have been able to keep himself in this pit delta to Verstappen, so Verstappen would either risk staying out on old tyres for longer, or take the pit stop but lose position to Hamilton. But as it was, Hamilton wasn't able to play with this at all, and all hope of interfering with Max's race seemed out the window now. Well, okay, but maybe Hamilton's next best move is to undercut Perez, get into the pit, switch to new inters first, and try and gain position with some exceptional outlap work on fresh rubber, but that goes out the window immediately as Perez stops just 1 lap after Verstappen. There's no sneaky advantage to be gained by matching Sergio stop for stop, so Hamilton stays out even longer. Mercedes are already back-footing it at this point. The race isn't turning in their favour, so they are now trying to win by outdancing their rivals through strategy rather than beating them on track, which is an odd decision considering their car was demonstrably faster than everyone else. Maybe Hamilton should have stopped with Perez and just used the new rubber to go full beans and overtake him on outright pace. It looked very possible, but that was another road not taken. The one good thing Mercedes had left in their arsenal was Charles Leclerc. Bottas pitted on lap 37, just as Perez had, and ceded the lead to Leclerc, who had yet to stop. It was at this point that we began to wonder if Mercedes, in playing safe, had given up the victory as well as the lead perhaps. Staying out on the old set seemed possible. Last year, drivers did incredibly long stints on intermediate tyres as the track dried at about the same rate as the tread was wearing away on the inters. So as the track became suitable for dries, the rubber on the tyre surface was basically slick now anyway. And the track was doing the same this year, roundabout. But whatever happened, Mercedes could watch Charles' lap times as a bit of extra information on what holding on would even look like. And it wasn't great. Leclerc held on for a while in the 134s, but then drops into the 135s and 36s. Meanwhile, Bottas and Verstappen behind are doing solid 33s and 34s and catch him easily on lap 46. On lap 41, a little earlier, Mercedes do call Hamilton into box as they start to see the pace of those on the new tyres versus those hanging on. After all, they may as well get as long as possible on these new tyres if the gap between new and old is looking to be significant. Let's get ahead of that crossover window when the olds start to drop off. Hamilton, though, declines to come in. He's feeling good on his tyres at the moment and has reasonable track position, but Mercedes are now looking at the bigger picture. Perez is 15 seconds behind him and the only car he would lose track position to if he pitted now. Gasly is 27 seconds back, but with the pace of the new tyres, he will also be a threat to his pit delta should they need to pit. If they're gonna pit, it's better to do it now and fight on track in the remaining laps than risk Gasly driving right into his pit window and putting more positions on the line. But they give Hamilton more time to consider it. Lewis is still looking at a potentially dry track coming his way, and if they can hold on long enough, he can skip the second set of inters completely, go straight to slicks and save an entire pit stop. But he has to wait. Now Vettel gambled hard on switching to slicks on lap 38 and had no pace. It threw his whole race in the bin instantly. But as Leclerc becomes a sitting duck, losing the lead and then pitting to promote Hamilton to third, the temptation becomes even stronger to hold position and wait. He's now in a podium position. At this point, Mercedes are unsure if the tyres will last to the end at all. It seems very unlikely, and the only reason they don't force the point harder is Lewis's insistence he can make it work. His confidence drives a lot of this waiting period. But by lap 50, it became clear to Mercedes, based on the data, that Hamilton's tyres are dropping off and they will fall away beyond a competitive state. If he pits now, he will lose position to Leclerc and Perez, but will be able to push on his new tyres. But if he waits any longer to pit, Gasly will close up the gap and he'll end up losing 3 positions. So now is the moment. If he hangs it out, he'll very likely lose positions to at least 2 cars anyway, as they'll catch him and pass him with incredible ease. And this could well end up being a Norris in Russia situation where the driver feels fine and wants to fight on in the moment, but can't see 2 laps ahead of them when they'll be on entirely the wrong tyres and have literally nothing left to fight with. So what's happened at this point by taking decisions early on to wait, by not being able to pass Perez? Mercedes and Hamilton have squeezed themselves into a tactical corner. Every possible decision now leads to positions lost and potential points being thrown away. And when Hamilton finally does pit on lap 50, which was almost certainly the best possible decision at that moment in time, he can't even fight properly as the Inters go through a 6, 7, 8 lap graining phase as the semi-dry track wreaks havoc on their rubber. His pace is hampered and Hamilton is frustrated, seeing track positions given up when he could have stayed out to fight. But it wasn't a stupid decision to pit. Hamilton staying out to defend would have been tricky at minimum. Sure, Perez and Leclerc would actually have to pass him on track, but would Hamilton have had any tools to defend with? Let's look at Ocon. He was the only driver that actually went the whole race without pitting. So in theory, he proved it was possible to do it. But in fact, Ocon did 1 less lap than the leaders as he was himself lapped. And his tyres were such a wreck that Pirelli were almost certain they would have failed given another lap or so. And crucially, Ocon was not fighting hard for position. He paced himself deliberately to do a single stint across the race. And looking at his lap times, he was going at an incredibly poor pace compared to basically every other car, particularly in the final 10 laps when Hamilton wanted to stay out. Ocon was doing 36s and 37s when even Mick Schumacher was doing 35s. Hamilton would likely have been on tiptoes, if on any tyres at all. And sure, it would have been lauded as brave as hell and a racist decision to risk it. But this championship is tight, incredibly tight. And Lewis can't afford to risk a complete tyre failure on one hand for a couple of extra points on the other. Mercedes made the right call. And I mean, the right call was to pit at basically the same points as Perez, maybe sooner. But as I said, we can only work within the circumstances we've already created for ourselves. So yes, Hamilton was frustrated at the time and fans wanted to see him go for it on old tyres, but at that moment in time, pitting was all they could do to salvage a race that had already slipped away from them. Big congrats to Valtteri though. Thanks for watching this video. And if you didn't know, this video is also available ad-free on Nebula, a streaming platform made by creators where we aren't all beholden to the weird ways of YouTube, and we get to make our own little nook. Nebula is home to some of the most interesting video creators I know, including Eternal Movie Optimist Cinema Wins, Explainer Extraordinaire, half as interesting, and aircraft expert Jenny Ma. And not only can you watch all of their videos in full and ad-free, but sometimes we like to add exclusive content that goes beyond the designed for YouTube model, with extended cuts, bonus material, or entire Nebula exclusive videos wherever you see this little plus logo. So if you think Nebula sounds pretty cool, well then you aren't alone in that. CuriosityStream are such big fans of Nebula's independent educational creators that they've teamed up with us to allow you to subscribe to both platforms for mere beans. You may know CuriosityStream. They're a massive streaming service with thousands of superb documentaries and educational series. So I talked about the power of data and information in decision making in this video, and if you want to delve more into that kind of area, CuriosityStream has educational films and videos that explore many branches of this topic, like AI and the destiny of mankind, which looks at how artificial intelligence can change the very way our entire civilization operates, much like how powerful data intelligence is transforming Formula One. Now here's the extra fun bit. If you go and sub to CuriosityStream, you will get Nebula completely free. Free as long as you're signed up to CuriosityStream. And if you sign up via my link in the description, curiositystream.com/chainbear, you'll get 26% off the annual plan, which is just $14.79 for the whole year for both platforms together. You'll get a whole bunch of amazing content, and you'll support us creators while you do it. So thanks. Go to curiositystream.com/chainbear.